everybody, BizBart here. MyOuterSpace TV is what you're watching, and hey, we've got a great guest here today. She's cool. This is Wanda Bryant, and she is an ethnomusicologist from the California Institute of the Arts who helped create the music for the big blockbuster film Avatar. Welcome to MyOuterSpace, Wanda.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Now, one of the first things that's going to come to mind is, what is an ethnomusicologist?
Well, an ethnomusicologist is a person who looks at the way that music works in a society. We look at who makes the music, why they make music, what different kinds of music they make, what musical instruments they use, and really focus on the social aspect of music making.
Now, are you permanently at the California Institute of the Arts?
I'm an adjunct lecturer there. I teach a class that is a world music survey for undergraduates, and I also do in-depth seminars. Each semester we look at a different culture.
Excellent. Now, there must not be many of these ethnomusicologists floating around, is there?
Well, actually there are,
Oh, yeah?
but there are not a lot of full-time jobs for ethnomusicologists. So you find us in a lot of different places. A lot of part-time people like myself, people working in museums, people working in public outreach sectors as well.
Excellent. Now, let's get to Avatar. Now, how were you first approached to be a part of this gigantic project?
It's probably the funniest story in the whole thing. I was spring cleaning my junk mail folder on my email account in May of 2007, waiting for that $1 million offer from the Nigerian prince, right?
Yeah.
Well, instead, I found an email that was titled Feature Film Consultation. And I thought, yeah, right, they're coming to me for this. But something piqued my curiosity, and I had to open it, so I did, and I started reading. I didn't know the person who it was from, but as I read on, I started reading the names of Jim Cameron and composer James Horner, and I'm starting to think this looks legitimate. Mm-hmm. And so I bravely called the phone number at the bottom of the screen, and within 2 minutes, I was speaking with John Landau, producer of Avatar.
So what happened following that conversation?
Well, I spoke to John for probably 15 or 20 minutes, and we talked about what was going to be expected of me in this film, and what I could bring to the film. And he said, "Would you mind if I give your email and your phone contact to James Horner?" I said, "Fine, I'd love to speak to him."
Right.
And
incidentally, James Horner was the man who composed and directed all of the music for Avatar.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's the composer.
Yeah.
And he called me about 10 days later, and we had a great hour-long conversation on the phone. We talked about what he was looking for, what he hoped to do. And in fact, the first thing he said to me was he wanted music that no one had ever heard before. Not too small a challenge to place on me right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But then we met about a week later, saw some initial footage, and then we went into what they call the war room, which is where we saw storyboards, preliminary sketches of various characters, the environment, and we began to talk about this culture and what it might sound like.
Fantastic. So from the point of seeing all of that footage, being privy to that, then what was your sort of first task?
The first task was to bring James unusual sound sources, because as he said, he wanted something that no one had ever heard before. And in today's world, that's really tough, because with the internet, everyone knows, for example, what a Javanese gamelan sounds like. So I can't use, things that would be from more well-known cultures. So I started delving into the music of minority cultures, and I compiled, I think, approximately 200 to 250 sound samples over the course of maybe 2 months.
By sound samples, do you mean like a sound bite, like a quick
Yes,
sound of something?
yes.
Okay.
I would take James' sound samples of no longer than maybe 30 seconds. Because with his ear, he is so well versed in world music, he would listen to 5 or 10 seconds of a clip and go, "Nope, too recognizable. Nope, that's China. Nope, that's Bulgaria. We can't use that." So I really had to delve for some very, very interesting sounds. So we would sit and listen to these musical examples I'd bring in, and he'd say yes, no, maybe. We'd start to pare down the selections and go from there.
Okay, so then you had your selections of unusual sounds that James Horner had okayed.
Yes.
And how many of those did you have?
Well, we finally pared it down to about 25. And then he took those to Jim Cameron, because Jim Cameron's a very hands-on director, even with the music. A lot of directors just say, here's the film, you go score it. But Cameron wants to know every step along the way what's going on. So we took our 25 samples to him. And then he went through a similar process. Yes, this works. No, this doesn't. No, I already know what this is, so we can't use that. And we pared it down to about 6 or 8 samples that we then began to work from in earnest.
And so at that point, you began to actually compose.
Yes, it wasn't composing in the normal sense of the word that you might think you sit down with pen and paper. What we did was to go initially into the recording studio. I hired some students from Cal Arts because they're so great. They're trained in new music techniques, in singing contemporary music styles, so they can use their voices in some very unusual ways. And they're used to doing things like that. They're used to improvising. So initially, those were our singers. We brought them into the studio and talked to them about the kinds of things we were working on, and then we would play some of the samples for them and say, this is what we're thinking about. Can you do something like this?
To recreate vocally
Yes.
these unusual clips.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the sounds that they heard, the people singing in these clips that I brought in. We didn't want the exact sound. We wanted something that was similar, inspired by that sound, and then something that we could then continue to manipulate and turn into the music of Avatar.
And so the final product, I suppose, what people are hearing in the film Avatar, how close is that to what you were doing in that setting?
In some cases, it's very close. There are, so far in my research, I've found 5 places where I can identify very clearly, here was the sound source that I brought to James Horner, and here's something very similar. Not the same. You can hear Horner's creativity in it, but the concept or the sound quality, something that is there that's very recognizable. But really only in a few places, because then from those samples, he began to blend sounds together. And that's where the true genius comes in, is he would take a voice quality and a different song structure and link them together. Right. He would take sounds of voices that may be more African sounding and more Asian sounding, record them separately, and blend them together for a different tone quality.
Did you ever, in your wildest imagination, picture yourself in a position where you're a part of one of the biggest motion pictures in history?
Absolutely not. Never in my wildest dreams was this something that I thought would ever happen. You know, this is, okay, we live in Los Angeles. The film world is all around us, but you never expect, at least not in the world of academia, you don't expect that world will come calling.
And there's also been discussion of a prequel, a sequel of some kind.
I've heard those discussions.
I imagine you'd be happy to be part of the process.
I would love to. I have a lot of ideas that some of which didn't make it into this film, but I think could be really fascinating to expand our knowledge of the world of the Na'vi people.
Excellent. So have you any advice for anyone out there who's thinking of becoming an ethnomusicologist?
Sure. I think that one of the most important things is to keep your ears open. Keep your ears open to unusual sounds, things that you may find a little uncomfortable now. With a little bit of listening, some of those may become the favorite sounds in your musical world. And of course, my biggest piece of advice, always check your junk email folder.
Thanks for being part of this transmission. For BizBart and myouterspace TV, so long.